grew up with one rule: if you can't pay cash, you can't afford it. I was proud of my zero debt, but my savings stayed frozen. Then something changed. You see, one night at 2 a.m, I couldn't sleep, staring at my tiny bank balance. My phone lit up. It was my college friend Mark texting me. Mark wrote, "Just signed papers on unit number 3, and I froze because we had the same salary, the same background, yet he was stacking properties while I hoarded cash. That's when it hit me. I'd been reading the equation backward. I thought debt was the villain. But for wealthy people, debt becomes a tool when you use it carefully. Now imagine this. Society warns you about debt, but it mixes two totally different things. There's consumer debt that makes you poorer, and producer debt that can pay you back. On the consumer side, it's borrowing for stuff that fades, like a car, a vacation, or shopping. You pay interest, and the value drops. That's how people quietly get poorer. But on the producer side, the story flips. You borrow to buy something that pays you back, like a rental property or a business. The debt isn't spending, it's leverage. Surprisingly, the secret word is leverage. In physics, a lever lets you lift something heavy with little effort. In finance, leverage lets you control a bigger asset with less cash. Here's the math that finally clicked for me. If you buy one $100,000 house with cash, a 5% rise gives you $5,000. But leverage can multiply that. In fact, with the same $100,000, Mark didn't buy one house. He used $20,000 down on 5. So when prices rise 5%, it's on $500,000. That's $25,000. And here's the part nobody says out loud. Mark wasn't richer than me. He just understood the game. He asked, what if the asset pays the debt for you? So picture a rental house like a little machine. Tenants send rent every month, and that rent covers the mortgage payment. Meanwhile, the house just sits there appreciating. You're not paying the full bill. Someone else is helping you build equity, one payment at a time. It feels almost unfair until you realize it's simply how contracts work. This is why rich people love the phrase other people's money. The bank fronts the purchase, the tenant helps repay it, and you keep the long-term upside. Now, does that mean debt is magical? No, it means you must borrow for something with cash flow or growth or both, something that can carry its own weight. If you borrow for a vacation, the memory fades, but the payment stays. If you borrow for an asset, the payment stays too, and the asset keeps paying you back. Let's make it concrete. Imagine rent is $2,000 a month and the mortgage is $1,700. That extra $300 is cash flow, small, but it adds up fast. And even if cash flow is near zero, principal gets paid down. Each month, a tiny slice of your loan disappears. You're buying ownership without writing new checks. Then there's inflation, the sneaky partner in this deal. Over time, dollars get weaker, meaning your fixed mortgage payment becomes easier to pay with tomorrow's money. So while your payment stays roughly the same, rents often rise with inflation. That gap can widen, turning a break-even rental into a real income stream. And here's the wild twist. Inflation can also raise asset prices. So the house value climbs, your loan balance falls, and the equity difference grows from both directions. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, so why doesn't everyone do it? Because leverage cuts both ways, and most people use it without a safety plan. Debt isn't a lottery ticket. It's a power tool. Use it carefully, and it builds a house. Use it recklessly, and it takes your fingers off fast. So the real question becomes, how do you make good debt safer? You focus on 3 things: cash flow, reserves, and time. Those are your shock absorbers. Cash flow gives you breathing room, reserves cover surprises like repairs or vacancies, and time is what lets appreciation and loan paydown do their slow, boring magic. Mark told me his rule: I never buy a deal that can't survive a bad month. That means he stress tests the numbers before he ever signs anything. He asks, what if rent drops? What if I'm vacant for 60 days? What if repairs hit next week? If the deal still works, he moves. If not, he walks. Now let's zoom out. Real estate is one example, but the principle is bigger. Businesses use debt for equipment, inventory, and expansion because it increases capacity. A bakery might borrow for a second oven. That oven creates more bread per hour, which creates more revenue. The debt is tied to production, not consumption. Same with a delivery company buying trucks, or a clinic buying machines, or even a freelancer financing a tool that lets them bill more hours at higher rates. The pattern is simple. If the thing you're buying can generate cash, it can help repay the debt. That's what separates bad from productive borrowing. But there's another advantage wealthy people quietly chase: taxes. Some assets offer deductions and depreciation that can reduce taxable income legally while your equity keeps growing. Depreciation is especially weird. The building can depreciate on paper even if the market value rises, so you can show less income while getting richer in equity. I know, it sounds like a cheat code, but it's written into tax rules to encourage investment, construction, and business activity, so capital keeps moving, building jobs and housing. Then comes the strategy that made my jaw drop: refinancing. If your property grows in value, you can refinance and pull out cash, often without selling the asset. So you can access money while still owning the asset that keeps appreciating. It's like harvesting fruit without cutting down the tree. That's when compounding really speeds up. But again, this only works when the underlying asset is solid. If you refinance recklessly, you can wipe out cash flow and trap yourself with a bigger payment. Here's a safer mental model. Debt is a bridge to ownership. It gets you in sooner so time can work for you. The goal isn't more debt, it's more assets. And assets, by definition, either produce income, rise in value, or reduce your costs. Ideally, they do 2 or 3 of those at the same time. Now, let's address the biggest fear. What if the market crashes? Great question. Because leverage magnifies outcomes, your first defense is buying with a real margin of safety. That means not stretching your budget to the maximum the bank approves. The bank's job is to lend. Your job is to survive. Those are not the same incentives. Second defense, fixed rate debt, when you can. A fixed payment gives you predictability, which is priceless when life gets chaotic, vacancies happen, or interest rates spike. Third defense, diversification. Mark didn't bet everything on one property. He spread risk across units and tenants, so one vacancy couldn't knock the whole plan over, and he kept liquidity. People ignore this, but cash isn't bad. Cash is insurance. The mistake is hoarding cash forever instead of deploying it with a clear plan. So the goal is balance. Enough cash to sleep at night and enough invested assets to grow. Wealth is built with consistency, margin of safety, and patience. Not bravado. Here's a quick timeline. Year 1, you buy an asset with a down payment. Years 2 through 5, tenants pay down principal. Years 5 to 10, rents rise. It accelerates. Years 5 through 10, rents rise. Your payment stays fixed and cash flow improves. Meanwhile, appreciation compounds. Suddenly you have options you didn't have before. Option 1, hold and enjoy growing income. Option 2, refinance carefully to buy another asset. Option 3, sell and roll proceeds into a bigger opportunity. That roll is why you hear wealthy people talk about moving equity. They treat equity like stored energy, releasing it at the right time, then storing it again. Now, if you're thinking, this sounds like it requires perfect timing, it doesn't. What it requires is buying sensible deals and holding long enough for time to matter, because time is the multiplier people underestimate. A 5% gain once feels small. A 5% gain repeatedly on a leveraged asset over 10 years feels like a different life. That's why debt, used correctly, can build wealth. Not because debt itself is good, but because it gets you into the game earlier, with more exposure to compounding. Let me confess something. When I first heard this, I felt angry, like I'd been lied to. But the truth is, the warning debt is bad was incomplete, not evil. It was meant to protect people from consumer debt traps, credit cards, payday loans, fancy cars, but it accidentally scared people away from productive tools too. So here's a practical filter. Before borrowing, ask, will this purchase put money into my pocket or take money out forever? That one question changes everything fast. If it puts money in your pocket, ask the next question. Is the cash flow reliable, and do I have reserves if reality gets messy? Reality always gets messy. And if you're new, start small. A modest asset you can manage beats a flashy one that manages you. Progress feels boring at first. That's usually a good sign. Also, learn the numbers: interest rate, term, payment, vacancy, repairs, insurance. The wealthy aren't fearless, they're informed, and knowledge makes debt feel a lot less scary. Now, I'm not saying everyone should run out and buy rentals, but everyone should understand the mechanism, using debt to control assets that pay down that debt. Because once you see it, you can apply it anywhere. Education that increases income, tools that increase output, a business that scales, or investments with disciplined leverage. Just remember, leverage is a volume knob. Turn it up a little, you amplify progress. Turn it up too high, you amplify mistakes, stress, and risk. Keep it safely controlled. Mark's final lesson was simple. Your first deal should survive boredom and survive panic. Boredom means it's stable. Panic means it's resilient when life gets loud. And when you build that foundation, the rest becomes repetition. Buy, stabilize, hold, and repeat. Not hype, not hustle, just systems, boring discipline, and patience over time. So the takeaway isn't get debt, it's get educated debt, with a purpose, a plan, a cushion, and an exit. That way it serves you, not the other way around. If you want to start today, do this. List your monthly expenses, build a small emergency fund, then study one asset class deeply. Clarity is how you reduce risk long term. Then talk to people who are actually doing it, not gurus, real owners. Ask what surprised them, what went wrong, and what they'd do differently. Those stories are gold, because behind every overnight success is a decade of boring decisions. Debt just accelerates the results of those decisions, good or bad. That's the honest truth. And once you accept that, you stop chasing shortcuts. You start designing a process. That's when wealth stops feeling like luck and starts feeling like engineering. So, cash isn't the enemy, debt isn't the hero. The hero is using tools correctly. And the first tool you need isn't a loan, it's a strategy you stick to. My old rule was never borrow. Mark's rule was never borrow without a return. One rule keeps you safe, the other helps you grow. The difference is intention. Over 10 minutes, that's the mental shift. Stop asking, how do I avoid debt? And start asking, how do I buy assets that can carry responsible debt? Because when an asset carries the debt, you're not stuck paying for the past. You're building ownership for the future. That's why it can feel like wealth builds itself. If this clicked for you, rewatch the leverage example and run the numbers on paper. Numbers don't argue. They'll show you exactly what's possible and what's not. And if you want a part 2, We can break down real scenarios, what counts as an asset, how to stress test deals, and how to avoid traps that ruin beginners. So next time someone says debt is always bad, you'll smile because you'll know the missing sentence. Debt is dangerous without a plan, but powerful with the right asset.